We are back on Night Talk with the author of Exegesis, Astro Teller, who is here to talk about this book written entirely in email style about a woman who develops a rather interesting relationship with her computer program, which takes on a mind of its own.
That's fair.
That's pretty good. All right, good. By the way, in Pittsburgh Magazine, there's a nice little article about Astro Teller that we read shortly before we went on the program. It's informative. I don't know if this thing's any good or not, since they fired our friend Kathy Jo Kramer, who was a columnist there. So we don't, this thing could be horrible now, for all I know. But the article about him is good. Pick it up at your newsstand today. Anyway, so how likely is it that programs will take on minds of their own and perhaps control us and do all sorts of evil things to us? Are you a doom and gloom prophet?
Oh, certainly not.
No?
There are several different issues. One is, will there be computer programs in the future that do things that today look like science fiction? Right? And then there's a separate issue, which is, will they do the things they do in the movies, like take over the Earth and be a bit nasty to people?
Yeah.
And those are entirely different issues. Right. The first one I'm more happy to address because it's more like predicting the future of science and technology and less like predicting the future of the media.
It sounds like you doubt the second one will actually occur.
I don't see any reason why that would happen.
I'm glad to hear that.
The answer to the first is that while I'm a little uncomfortable making an actual prediction, because people tend to be wrong as soon as they start making predictions about when science will or won't come through about
Listen, nobody else will remember what you said.
Oh, I know. But I would say maybe 30 years from now is the sort of time frame that I personally expect to see computers performing much better than people along at least certain dimensions that we currently describe as intelligence. With Deep Blue doing well against Kasparov recently.
In the chess game.
In the chess game, yes.
It beat him, right? I mean...
It did beat him. I think the results weren't quite as conclusive as the media made it out to be. He was obviously rattled by the fact that he was playing a computer program, the fact that the media were hovering over him, telling him that the fate of humanity rested on the way he played his game. I think if they played another 50 games, it would have looked like he was still a bit ahead. Obviously, we don't know that, but that's my guess.
You're just a homer. You're just rooting for the humans, that's all.
No, one of my shticks is I don't see why it has to be us against the machines. So I've actually gotten on this thing since I've started interviewing, but people often ask, well, when are the machines going to start beating us? When are they going to take over the world? I don't see why it has to be that way. I mean, we used to think that way about nature, and now we're on a huge kick. Oh, we're part of nature. Maybe we shouldn't beat up on nature. We should be nice to nature instead. I think it's the same thing. I think...
Well, when we used to think machines would solve all of our problems, not create them.
Right. And I think it comes basically from a fear that we'll become useless.
We actually, that fear has become reality for many of us at the Pittsburgh Cable News Channel, I must tell you. Kathy, you're on Night Talk for Astro Teller. I'm sorry, Mary, excuse me. Go ahead.
I was wondering...
No, it is Kathy. See, we're totally useless. What did I tell you? Go ahead.
Go ahead, ignore him.
If only this was a machine answering. But I'm wondering how this story fits in with maybe other creation stories or legends or myths.
Oh, that's a fantastic question. There's almost no question I'd be more happy to answer. I'm very interested in those sorts of myths and legends. I'll tell you some of the stories that most influenced me while I was writing the book. Stories like Pygmalion, the king of Cyprus, named Pygmalion, creates the statue, calls it Galatea, falls in love with it, prays to the goddess Aphrodite, and the statue comes to life, and the plot proceeds. But that's a sort of story of artificial intelligence, even though it's over 2,000 years old. The story of Christ, depending on your religious viewpoint, can be seen as an artificial intelligence. It's certainly a story about something which is not entirely human, but might be able to teach us something about the way the world is. Frankenstein is another story that I was thinking about a lot when I wrote the book. This book is not a retelling of any of those stories, but it's certainly a response to some of those stories. For example, I think you could profitably read the book as an allegory for the second coming of Christ. That's not what the book is about, but I think it is interesting to read it thinking about those issues, and there's certainly a number of interesting pointers in there too.
And were you hinting at that with the title Exegesis?
Yes. There are actually 3 different reasons that I called the title Exegesis.
Reason number 1.
The reason number 1 was that, well, I'm going to back off for a second. The reason it's an email format is because Edgar, the computer program that one of the two protagonists of the story, has to suffer through an existence in which he has no sensory information. He lives only through the world of email. And to get you to feel for Edgar, at least to understand what it might be like a little bit to be Edgar, I force the reader to experience that same lack of description about the world by making it all in email format.
Let me interrupt, and
Okay.
we'll get to reason number 2 and 3 after we take this phone call from Joe. Joe, you're on Night Talk for Astro Teller.
Yeah, how you doing?
Hi.
Did you ever hear of the Jackie Martling statue?
Jackie Martling statue. Gotta say I haven't.
You know what that was? It was a Howard Stern call, and we cut him off before he got to say Howard Stern. We finally won one. Sorry, reason number 2.
Reason number 2. So I haven't said. Reason number
please.
1 is that Edgar, this computer program,
Yeah.
has to go through a process of exegesis. Exegesis means the critical interpretation of a text. And Edgar has to go through this process in order to find out about the world. The second reason is that you, the reader, ought to, especially if you read this book more than once, go through the book doing that yourself, because the book, though it can certainly be read as a techno-thriller, also has in it a large number of references and responses to aspects of classical myths about artificial intelligence. And so there's a lot buried in there that you won't notice on the first read, but you can have a lot of fun going through and thinking about on a second read.
Yeah, but you've got to continue to sell it on both the highbrow level and every once in a while throw in techno-thriller to get the lowbrow, you know?
Techno-thriller it is. The third reason is, as you pointed out, that most people, especially people who don't know the word exegesis, think when they hear the word exegesis that they've heard exit Jesus. And that pun certainly pleases me, because one of the many subjects of the book is possible relations between what it would be like for an artificial intelligence to come into being and how fear among humans might allow or cause that program to be mistreated, and how that relates to the religious story of Jesus, the Son of God.
That Jesus.
Yeah, you remember.
We are
him.
talking with Astro Teller, author and scientist, and we'll be back with more of our conversation, and the author of Exegesis, available at a fine bookstore near you. Stay with us, more of Night Talk straight ahead.